Coworker excluded. Just me from his wedding, and his life became a crap show. I've been with my company for 7 years, dedicating 5 of those to my current team of 15 members. We share a close bond, all things considered. My colleague Bob, a 33-year-old man, joined our team the same time I did. Amid the pandemic, he shared his engagement news over a Zoom call. Fast forward to this January, Bob announced his upcoming September wedding at a picturesque winery. Roughly 5 months ago, invitations began arriving for my teammates, but not for me. After waiting a few weeks and receiving nothing, I approached Bob to inquire about my invitation. He responded solemnly, explaining I wasn't invited due to space constraints, assuring me it wasn't personal and promising wedding favors and cake. He requested I keep this to myself and not make a fuss. Confused and hurt, I complied, feeling the sting of exclusion, especially since I enjoy weddings and was the only team member not invited. The wedding occurred 3 weeks ago, celebrated by my colleagues as a fantastic event, complete with delicious food and apple cider donuts for guests. I, however, received neither cake nor favors. The following Monday, my co-worker Sherry expressed surprise at my absence, revealing Bob had told everyone I was ill. Angered by the lie, I clarified I hadn't been invited, which soon became common knowledge among the team. Upon Bob's return from his honeymoon, he confronted me for sharing this, downplaying the significance of my absence. Our exchange grew heated, culminating in Bob's departure. My upset was noticeable enough to draw concern from my project manager and sympathy from other team members, who felt Bob's exclusion was unjust. While I acknowledge it was Bob's right to invite whom he wished to his wedding, I believe I'm also entitled to feel upset over being the only one left out, particularly when everyone else received +1s. So, am I wrong for being openly upset and discussing the situation? Aside from Bob and myself, there's a 26-year-old woman on our team who also received an invitation and attended the wedding by herself. This has led me to speculate that perhaps Bob's wife preferred I not attend, though the reason eludes me. Our only interaction was at a work Christmas party, where we chatted about Super Mario Maker and Breath of the Wild for about 15 minutes. It's unlikely she harbors any romantic interest in me. She added me online afterward merely to download some of the levels I created for Super Mario Maker, and we haven't communicated in 3 years since then. It's possible she simply appreciates my game-level design skills, humorously enough. For context, I share the same ethnicity as both Bob and his wife, and nothing about me particularly stands out. My team includes diverse members, all of whom were invited, and the wedding photos reflect a varied guest list. I wouldn't describe myself as conventionally handsome in a Hollywood heartthrob kind of way, but at 6 feet 4 inches tall with a physique honed by regular workouts, I'm confident in my appearance. To clarify any assumptions, I'm successful in my romantic endeavors, mentioning my straight orientation not out of vanity, but for context. Bob, on his part, is a good-looking man, not as tall as me, but certainly not lacking in height or engaging conversation. I find it hard to believe he'd see me as a threat. My reluctance to escalate this issue stems partly from our work arrangement, which allows us to telecommute 3 days a week, minimizing our in-person interactions. Furthermore, Bob and I have never had any conflicts, save for this incident. However, I'm attentive to how he's framing this situation and will not hesitate to involve my project manager should things escalate. Update. Am I wrong for disclosing that I was excluded from a wedding? First off, I appreciate everyone's feedback, especially regarding the wedding invitations. Now, for an intriguing update, Bob sought me out at work today, proposing we discuss the matter over beers with his wife post-work. Agreeing, I later joined Bob and his wife, Pam, at a bar where they both extended heartfelt apologies for the omission and any resultant feelings of exclusion. Bob expressed regret for his falsehood and subsequent anger. Their rationale for not inviting me centered on a desire to avoid single men at their celebration, rooted in a past wedding disaster in 2019, marred by inebriated single men's advances towards female guests, escalating to a brawl and subsequent arrests. Though skeptical, evidence from Facebook verified their account depicting chows akin to a wrestling match, with statuses corroborating their narrative. Pam, still shaken by that event, was adamant about excluding single men from their wedding, resulting in an invite list limited to family, couples, single women, or select single men. She insisted this strategy ensured a safer, more comfortable environment for female guests, emphasizing the decision was not personal. Upon questioning their trust in my behavior, Pam admitted Bob advocated for me, yet her stance remained firm. As a concession, she took responsibility for explaining the exclusion to inquirers, and Bob earned the right to pick their honeymoon destination. Interestingly, Pam hinted at a potential match with her sister, labeling it a protective measure given her sister's reputedly promiscuous nature. Her characterization, not mine. Bob acknowledged his mishandling of the situation, admitting honesty might not have eased the blow, but hoped for my understanding, presuming my disinterest in attending solo. Their assumptions of my potential misconduct at the wedding pained me, yet Pam reassured me of their high regard for my character, merely prioritizing a seamless wedding day. They vowed amends, which I deemed unnecessary, yet Pam's insistence led to arranging a compensatory dinner on their dime at a premier city restaurant this weekend. In the end, it appears my exclusion wasn't due to my actions, yet I can't help feeling slighted, though the prospect of a free meal offers some consolation. Following the edit, it's clear from many comments that I might be perceived as too lenient or naive for not taking a stronger stand against being indirectly labeled as a potential troublemaker. To be honest, your perspectives hold weight. I usually advocate for taking the moral high ground, but this scenario might not be suited for such leniency. I hold a belief that seeing the good in people and trusting their intentions doesn't equate to naivety. After a recent discussion with my project manager about everything that transpired, she suggested making a report to HR as a precaution against creating a hostile work environment, with a meeting scheduled for Monday. While I'm hesitant to lodge a formal complaint, I see the value in documenting the incident, even though I doubt Bob would cause further issues. However, my judgments have been mistaken in the past. Given your advice, I've decided to decline the dinner invitation from Bob and Pam. Instead, I will request a public apology that doesn't cast me in a negative light, alongside a demand for authentic, freshly made apple cider donuts, eschewing any store-bought alternatives. Your input has been enlightening, Reddit. Despite forgoing a chance at enjoying some Wagyu steak, I find solace in your support, jokingly noting you all owe me one. Update 1. Before diving into the latest update, I'd like to address some inquiries and misconceptions. Some posts and direct messages question my expectation to be invited to the wedding. To set the record straight, I never felt entitled to an invitation. Sure, I would have liked one, but my main issue was not with the decision itself, but rather the lack of transparency surrounding it. Bob and I never engaged in conversations about women. Our interactions were strictly professional. Similarly, male team members didn't engage in such discussions, to my knowledge, although I can't speak for the woman on our team. I'm inclined to trust Pam's explanation regarding her past negative experiences with men, which influenced her decision to exclude a single man from the wedding. This choice wasn't arbitrary. Both Pam and Bob had to turn away friends who wished to attend. Pam's decision stemmed from her desire to protect herself and her guests, inspired by her own uncomfortable encounters and a particularly chaotic wedding of a close friend that ended disastrously. The uncertainty about my invitation was primarily due to Pam's lack of familiarity with me, aside from my reputation as a talented Super Mario Maker level designer. Bob advocated on my behalf, but Pam's reservations persisted, especially considering her sister's track record and apparent interest in my profile. Ultimately, Pam chose to shoulder the responsibility for this decision, with Bob hoping I would understand. Bob's remorse seemed genuine, suggesting either remarkable acting skills or sincere regret. His explanation for the initial lie, a moment of panic and subsequent frustration, was more a reflection of his own dilemma than any issue with me. He's committed to issuing a public apology to clear the air when we're next in the office. Pam, too, expressed regret over the situation and the necessity of her decision, but stood by her actions to ensure female guests' safety. Her offer to reconcile included an invitation to a homemade meal and a casual gaming session, which I declined. Despite the misunderstandings, both Bob and Pam have expressed a desire to move past this, albeit in ways I've chosen not to accept. It was at this juncture that the proposition of dining at a high-end restaurant came into play. I agreed to it, viewing it as a reasonable middle ground at the moment. An elaborate apology wasn't a prerequisite for me, yet the gesture of a complimentary dinner was compelling enough to accept. Looking back, perhaps it wasn't the best decision, but in that moment, all I yearned for was to leave the situation behind and return home. Update 2. Prompted by comments labeling me as overly accommodating, I chose to decline the dinner invitation. I reached out to Bob via his work phone to communicate my decision. Although he was initially disappointed, he came to understand my perspective after I distilled my concerns. He agreed not to escalate the situation, and we agreed to move forward. I expressed my appreciation for his understanding before we ended the call. However, barely 5 minutes had passed before Bob called again, leading me to brace myself for another discussion. To my surprise, it was Pam on the line this time, expressing her disappointment but not with hostility. She was keen to understand my reasons for backing out. I shared with her the same explanation I gave Bob, highlighting how their actions indirectly cast me in a very negative light. While I made it clear I didn't want to dismiss her experiences, I also couldn't condone being labeled a potential threat. Pam insisted she never intended to paint me as such, and pleaded for an opportunity to meet and clarify her stance, suggesting we could foster a strong friendship if I allowed her the chance to explain in person. I politely declined, empathizing with her past experiences, but firm in my decision, and lightly mentioned the missed opportunity for those donuts before ending the call. The situation has been quiet since then, but with Bob returning to the office Monday, I'm concerned about potential unforeseen reactions from Pam. While I hope this chapter is closed, there's a part of me that remains wary of what might unfold. Should there be any new update, especially concerning Bob's candid admission while intoxicated, I'll be sure to provide an update. Update 3. Hello everyone. Following my last update, I communicated to Bob that I wouldn't be accepting the dinner invitation he and Pam extended for the weekend. He expressed his disappointment, but understood my stance. Shortly after, Pam called in an effort to salvage the dinner plans, but I stood firm in my decision, hoping that would conclude the matter. Unfortunately, the drama persisted. To dodge any potential awkward post-work discussions with Bob, I arrived at the office 2 hours early on Monday. Bob unexpectedly showed up an hour early too, looking noticeably distressed, not just physically tired, but mentally drained in a way I hadn't seen before despite our late nights working on projects together. We exchanged brief nods and focused on our work. I proceeded with my planned meeting with HR, where Sally, our HR representative, found the entire saga to be quite absurd in her 15 years of experience. She agreed to keep a note of our conversation unofficially, advising me to stay vigilant around Bob and Pam. The day was largely uneventful until Bob approached me in the break room, signaling his peaceful intentions. He expressed a desperate need to speak with me, promising it would be our last conversation on this matter if I preferred. He proposed a meeting for a drink to share what Pam hadn't during our previous encounter, emphasizing his current need for a friend and his long-standing view of me as one. Despite my reservations, I agreed to meet Bob after work, ensuring our conversation would be visible to a security camera for precaution. We headed to our usual bar, and, contrary to my suspicions, Pam was not there. Bob apologized again, more sincerely this time, and revealed the depth of the conflict over the wedding guest list. He shared that despite his efforts to persuade Pam to drop the single men's exclusion policy, she remained adamant, fueled by her vision of a grand wedding and concerns for guest safety, dismissing alternative solutions like security personnel or a smaller ceremony. Bob disclosed that the decision had caused tension, with both of them making concessions. Pam agreed to take responsibility for the exclusion and offered Bob the choice of their honeymoon destination as a compromise. They chose the French Riviera. This conversation provided a new perspective on the complexities behind their decision-making process and the personal sacrifices involved. Bob shared that the wedding reception was a hit, with many attendees thoroughly enjoying themselves, perhaps a bit too much, as some women were noticeably intoxicated. Despite the safety the event aimed to provide, a few guests humorously lamented the scarcity of hot guys to dance with one even jesting it felt like a lesbian wedding due to the male shortage. Interestingly, the few single men present did attract some attention, but Pam seemed less concerned about this dynamic, Post-honeymoon, they returned to a whirlwind of controversy. Pam's decision and her misleading explanations to her male friends about their non-invitation ignited a storm of backlash when the truth emerged, leading to accusations of treating them as potential threats. This misunderstanding caused Pam significant social fallout, with numerous friendships ending bitterly and her professional life under strain to the point where her job seemed untenable. Bob, now slightly inebriated, opened up further about the personal cost of the decision. Many of his male friends, feeling snubbed and insulted by the rationale behind their exclusion, organized a fishing trip on the wedding day in protest and made a pointed donation to a women's shelter. The fallout extended to strained family relations and a significant loss of friends for both Bob and Pam, with only a handful of supporters remaining. The tension had escalated to frequent arguments between Bob and Pam, with the strain affecting their marriage's initial bliss. Bob confessed that the situation had bred resentment, as the controversy overshadowed their newlywed joy and led to a sense of isolation. Interestingly, Bob mentioned that Pam had updated a favorable impression of me, regretting not having the opportunity to know me better prior to the wedding and even suggesting she might harbor a slight crush. This revelation added an odd twist to the narrative, especially when Bob laughingly suggested Pam's sister, Beth, wasn't the menace previously portrayed, but rather a confident, sexually liberated individual involved in ethical non-monogamy and kink, which piqued Pam and Bob's interest as well. This conversation shed light on Pam's fears of a potential connection between Beth and me, given our shared interests and similar dispositions, further complicating an already complex situation. Pam's assertion wasn't off the mark, nor was her assessment that I'd be her sister Beth's type, given my height and single status, which seemingly would have caught Beth's interest. Curiosity piqued, I nudged Bob to show me a photo of her. He navigated to her Instagram, revealing Beth's striking beauty, bearing a strong resemblance to Pam but with a slightly fuller figure. I couldn't help feeling a renewed frustration towards Pam, humorously enough. Bob shared that Pam has always harbored a hint of envy towards Beth, despite Pam's own undeniable attractiveness and their similar looks. In a playful act of defiance against Pam, Bob offered to connect Beth and me via Instagram and promised to vouch for me. I couldn't thank him enough, amused by the turn of events. He explained Pam's eagerness to reconcile with me stemmed from the significant impression I had made on her, believing we could forge a strong friendship. According to Bob, Pam, having alienated most of her friends, was now reaching out in the hope of making new ones, though he assured me he'd ensure Pam wouldn't intrude further into my life. As the evening progressed and Bob's inebriation deepened, he confided his growing doubts about his marriage, attributing the turmoil to the wedding planning and its fallout. He pondered the gravity of considering divorce over the ordeal, acknowledging the profound impact of Pam's decisions on his life. Urging me to keep this conversation confidential from Pam, he expressed his distress. After settling the bill, Bob intended to use public transport home, but I insisted on arranging an Uber for him, prioritizing his safety over his protests. Once he was safely en route, I received a text from Pam, using Bob's work phone, thanking me for looking after her husband and labeling me a good person. I chose not to reply, leaving the situation as is. While I hope this marks the conclusion of the saga, Pam's desperation hints at the possibility of further update. Regardless, I'll make sure to keep you all in the loop with any updates. New update. Hey everyone, just a quick update on my end. Bob kept his promise and passed along my Instagram to Beth. She reached out last week, and we hit it off from the start. Our conversation flowed so naturally that we arranged to meet for coffee over the weekend. For those skeptical among you, I'm pleased to report the date exceeded expectations. We delved into a variety of topics, from our hobbies and aspirations to our work and family life. It turns out Bob was spot on about our compatibility. We even share similar tastes in food. Encouraged by how well our coffee date went, we decided to meet again for drinks after work at a bar near her office. True to form, this encounter was just as fantastic. Now, for the update, I think will intrigue many of you. We've planned a hike for the upcoming weekend, which will include a stop at the winery where Bob and Pam's wedding took place, to finally claim those much-discussed apple cider donuts. If the vibe on this hike is as good as I anticipate, I'm considering asking Beth to officially start dating. There's something about her that feels distinctly right. That's the gist of it for now. I'll fill you in on how the hike goes, but it seems like things are winding down. Bob has stepped back, but certainly did me a solid, and I haven't heard from Pam in a week. Post-hike, I likely won't have much more to share, as I prefer not to drag out the drama. Thanks for all the support. Update 4. Hey everyone, a huge thanks to each of you for following along with this wild journey and for all the congrats on Beth and me. It's been quite the ride. So, here's what went down. As I hinted previously, Beth and I hit it off immediately and went on several dates. She's incredible, intelligent, hilarious, ambitious, and genuinely kind. To say I'm head over heels would be an understatement, LOL. Our recent hike on Saturday was nothing short of magical. Perfect weather, stunning autumn leaves, and breathtaking mountain views set the scene. We shared a picnic at the summit, and in a moment of serene quiet, I found the nerve to ask her to be my girlfriend. It might not have been the most original setting for such a question, but she found my timing adorably corny, and she said yes. Our descent included a much-anticipated stop at the winery from Bob and Pam's wedding, mainly for those famed apple cider donuts. Despite nearly missing them, we snagged a couple of the last batches, including some with apple filling, which were every bit as good as I'd hoped. The day didn't end there. We cooked dinner together at her place, turning an already perfect date into something truly special. When it was time to go, she playfully insisted I stay, leading to an incredible weekend together filled with brunch, leisurely walks, and plenty of hand-holding. Parting ways was tough. I felt like a love-struck high schooler dreading time apart. In an exciting twist, we made our relationship Instagram official, which didn't go unnoticed by Pam. Her reaction to discovering Beth and I were a couple was a terse acknowledgement of the inevitable. Despite potential tension, Beth and I are unfazed. This morning, I expressed my gratitude to Bob, who shared that my relationship with Beth had sparked a fallout with Pam, but he had no regrets. He brushed off my offer to buy him a drink, saying helping us get together was reward enough. Too much, as some women were noticeably intoxicated. That's the latest update. While Pam might not be thrilled about Beth and me, I'm incredibly happy. Beth truly is one of a kind, and I'll keep you posted if there's more to share. For now, sending out peace and love.